Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TF podcast. I'm excited for my guest today. Her name is Rachel Wolfson. You might know her from Cointelegraph and Forbes for awesome writing skills. We've had her participate in some of our past conferences and really have enjoyed seeing her continue to tell some amazing news and stories. And with that, Rachel, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'd love if you could just start out real quick and just introduce yourself. How did you get into this space, and how did you start writing about crypto to begin with?
Yeah, well, I've been writing about crypto and blockchain since 2017. Started out by contributing to Huffington Post. And when I first heard about blockchain in 2017, I was writing, I think my first story was about supply chain management and how blockchain is being applied there. And, I thought that was a really interesting use case. I wanted to learn more. And then the whole, you know, tied in element to cryptocurrency made blockchain even more interesting to me. So from there, I just continued learning and writing about it. I eventually became a staff writer with Bitcoin Magazine.
Hmm.
And then I became a contributor to Forbes, which was great. And then most recently, I joined Cointelegraph as staff. So I'm a reporter there and loving every minute of it. And yeah.
That's awesome. Did you have a journalism background before, or how did you start writing? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I've always loved writing. I don't have a journalism background. I have a degree in English and political science and also
Okay.
a master's, yeah, and a master's in security and diplomacy. So, but I mean, with all of, it's all liberal arts, there's a lot of writing.
Yeah.
And I've always enjoyed writing. So writing about tech just seemed to make sense in terms of a career. And yeah, I've been doing that for about the past 10 years now.
Nice. And so I'm assuming you get to interview and discuss a lot of interesting things. What are the topics that you focus most on, like
So
segment wise?
yeah. So I'm more interested in the blockchain side of things rather than the cryptocurrency side of things. I mean, I'm all for Bitcoin, don't get me wrong, but I think that blockchain as a technology is really interesting, especially in terms of, supply chain management, like I've mentioned before. I think that's one of the best use cases for blockchain. So enterprise blockchain, for instance, is one of the big things that I focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say that, since I've left Forbes and I've gone on with Cointelegraph, I'm still focusing on enterprise blockchain. A lot of my articles are around that. And even the podcast that I do, which is called The Crypto Chick, a lot of those interviews are around enterprise blockchain.
Yeah, super interesting. I agree. I think there's a lot of potential and actual practicality being used right now in that space, specifically supply chain. We just interviewed Satrag and Cappy from Samsung, and we were talking about enterprise blockchain. And it was funny because we were talking about the notion of decentralized, right? And so for them, their system is decentralized because the constituents of the consortium that need to have access to this information can access in that way, but it might not seem decentralized to, I don't know, say someone that is more from a public standpoint, right? Public blockchain, right? I'm curious how does that come across or come around, like when you're either interviewing folks or people talk to you about, blockchain versus Bitcoin or blockchain versus decentralized, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been around people that are heavily into cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about enterprise blockchain and, private permission blockchain networks, they kind of look at you like this is completely going against everything
Yeah.
because it's completely different than the Bitcoin open, transparent, public blockchain network. But the thing is that I've learned over the years that it's just if you're an enterprise and you have sensitive data that you want to keep private, you usually don't want to put that on a public blockchain network.
Yeah.
So something like Hyperledger Fabric would be perfect for enterprise blockchain to keep the data private, but it's still open, meaning if you have permission to that network, you can see the data. Not all of the data, but the data that you're supposed to be seeing. So
Right.
it's private permission, but it's still open. in a way and accessible to those network participants.
Totally. I think what I
Yeah.
find most interesting about, just that kind of conversation or debate is that, to me, it actually makes both of them stronger in a way. And this is what I mean by that is, I feel like the argument for Bitcoin, and why you would want it to be decentralized is stronger because of that, for that use of it, as well as for on the enterprise side, it's also stronger because of it, because of, them wanting to have access. So it's like, there is this world where you can have coexistence, right? It doesn't need to necessarily be one or the other, at least from on a technology implement side, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important because, and like I said, I'm all for Bitcoin. I believe in Bitcoin. I think it's great. But I think that enterprise blockchain is really helping drive mainstream adoption of the technology. And it's giving blockchain as a whole a really good, rep. I mean, you look at enterprises like IBM blockchain or like what Oracle is doing, and you see that they're using blockchain in these innovative ways. And people, start to think, wow, blockchain is a really great, useful technology that can be applied, not for all use cases, but like I said, supply chain management is one of the best use cases. And then that brings legitimacy to the whole space. And I think that, these hardcore cryptocurrency folks out there, I think sometimes they don't realize that, and that's fine, but that's just the way I look at it. I
yeah.
think it's great.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. Like, I mean, you can go even like with like the Libra scenario a few months ago is, um, regardless of what someone's opinions of Libra are, like, whether it's good or bad for the world, society, whatever, it definitely opened up conversation about that for the mainstay, right? And it's funny, my dad, because I had a blockchain project I was working on a few years ago, he goes, hey, when that happened, he goes, hey, Jonathan, Facebook did that Bitcoin thing that you tried to do, only better. I'm like, thanks, Dad. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah, well, I mean, I still don't know what's happening with Libra. I was at the Stanford blockchain conference recently, and I heard someone from Libra speak about their language that they're using. I think it's called Move. But
mhm.
anyways, that was the latest update I've heard about Libra. I don't know what else is going on.
Yeah, I haven't heard much from them either, which I kind of find interesting, right? Because it seems like they said a little bit too much information too quick, and so since then they've been more quiet, which I understand. But now there's all these conversations about, digital dollar. We should have some sort of digital dollar, and that's actually one of the conversations that Zuckerberg was having when he was on Capitol Hill, right? It's like, hey, think of this as a digital dollar. So that'll definitely be interesting to see what
Yeah,
happens there.
right. And now's the perfect time for
Yeah.
that digital dollar to come. So,
Right, right. Which is interesting on its own side, right? Because that there's the good and the bad of that is that, is this going to be traced or how? And it's interesting. So going back to from a reporting side of things, I'd love to kind of understand what your process is like when you start thinking about. I feel like that's a really important piece for people to understand is how a journalist kind of thinks through, when they put an article together, or what's they're going to be interviewing or so forth, because we're all consuming all this great media and content, but I'd love to kind of understand how that comes about.
right. So, I mean, I think that, I'm looking at trending topics. So, for instance, coronavirus is a trending topic right now, unfortunately. And so anything blockchain related to coronavirus is going to be really interesting for me. So, for instance, the latest article that I published was on the MiPasa platform, which was launched by a blockchain security company called Hasera. Some people think that it was launched by the World Health Organization. It was actually launched by Hasera,
Hmm.
and they're partnering with the World Health Organization and with IBM Blockchain, with Oracle, with Microsoft to gather data and to aggregate that data. And then that data, some of it gets put onto a blockchain platform, and that data can be shared. But basically, they're taking data analytics to figure out how to subdue the coronavirus outbreak by giving health officials accurate information that they can use and make sense of to, come up with recovery methods, or, um, you know, to figure out hot spots, and to tell people, this is not the best place to be right now. Definitely stay inside. Don't go outside, which is basically what we're hearing. But there's a lot of data and it's constantly changing. And apparently that data, it's just really inaccurate when it's constantly changing that way. So that's
Yeah.
why data analytics and blockchain is a perfect solution for MiPasa, for that
Yeah.
platform.
That's super fascinating. And it's, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. It's just there's so much complex data, and it's taking a lot of human interaction to try to make sense of that data. And maybe people are yeah, just like as with anything, is when you have the ability to analyze it faster or better, or even just from a read standpoint, that's super interesting. Yeah, my
Yeah.
assumption is there's a lot of more people obviously looking for that. I am, right. Every morning I basically look up real quick, what's happening in Corona, but then obviously what's happening in my space as well. um, Super interesting.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, when I heard that story, from IBM Blockchain, they were the ones that told me about it. I immediately wanted to cover it. I was like, okay, this is really useful. It's showing people how blockchain is being used to create trusted data around the coronavirus, because the data analytics, that works to aggregate the data and make sense of it. But by putting everything on a, or not everything, but some of that data on a blockchain platform, different entities like IBM, Oracle, they can validate that data. It's not just one person saying, oh, yeah, this data is accurate. There are different people saying that data is accurate. And then, the network participants can see the data. It's transparent. So there are benefits, definitely there,
Yeah.
blockchain.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Sorry to do this, but like, what else have you been reporting on? Because I like that story was super fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. I mean, I get a ton of press releases a day, as you can imagine, and I have
Totally.
to go through them and figure out what I want to cover. So, because my beat is enterprise blockchain, I mean, obviously, if it has an enterprise element, and in the technology side of things, I'm more interested in that versus just like, oh, let's talk about Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin, because that's not my expertise.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what I know or what I want to cover. It's like I can look at the price of Bitcoin and be like, oh, yay, it's over 7,000 today, great, but I can't write really about that. So, anything with an enterprise angle. I also wrote a really great story that's gotten a lot of traction about blockchain courses that you can take at home during quarantine.
Very cool.
Um, yeah, so that's obviously relevant to what's going on now. And a lot of the courses are heavily discounted or even free. And so people, with free time can get a certificate on blockchain. And so I definitely wanted to cover that story because a lot of people out there probably want to take those courses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome to see actually just how many people like that are offering free courses, and on blockchain, but even outside of it. Like I think Stanford's offering like a free one of their computer science courses, and there's quite a few not companies, but colleges also doing the same thing. It's
Yeah.
super interesting times. um
Yeah.
what do you think changes right now for you when it comes to how you're doing things? Like, do you normally do your investigations, or your conversations? Are you like meeting people in person when you do that? Is it on the phone? Is it a little bit of both? Like, what's kind of the new and old with what's been happening in the world for you?
Yeah. I mean, so honestly, I haven't really been impacted as much as other people because I work from home. So that's, working from home, working out from home, going on runs, like that's not new to me. I've been doing that for a very, very long time. I guess the only thing that's really changed is the conferences. I'm really active in going to the conferences. So a lot of those have become virtual,
Yeah.
which, yeah, and I'm totally fine with that. Like I love meeting people. I love getting out there, but I'm also a homebody. I'm kind of an introvert. Like I talk to people a lot, and I like just being at home sometimes and like doing my own thing and being, quiet and writing. So virtual conferences seems like a great idea. And I'll be keynoting at, the virtual conference that the Bad Crypto guys, Joel and Travis, are putting on
Yeah, I
in a
saw
few
that.
weeks.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. It will be my first virtual keynote.
Yeah, it seems like there's quite a good well, congrats on the first virtual keynote.
Thanks.
But yeah, it seems like there's going to be a really good crew there for that event. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it's called Virtual Blockchain Week. It's at the end of April. I think it starts April 26th, and other keynotes include Tim Draper, CZ, Justin Sun, Caitlin Long, Brittany Kaiser. So we've got a really good lineup of people, and it's free. I know there are like VIP tickets that you can pay for, where I think people can have access to like chat with the keynotes and all of that. But for the most part, the conference is completely free.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
definitely be checking that out myself. Very
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
Cointelegraph is covering it. That's the media partner.
nice. That's
So
great.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Overall, like with when it comes to like Cointelegraph or just like journalism in general, I'm assuming everything is kind of more on the uptick when it comes to like COVID coverage, right? Like, how does that work? Do you think do people start to get fatigued about information when it comes to the specifics of what's happening, or does it this kind of continuously stay up? I've always been curious about that.
Well, I mean, I think the whole world is, focused on COVID right now. And
Yeah,
so having news stories that relate to that are going to, people are going to probably want to read that. I know I'm trying to read less about coronavirus just because it's so stressful to read about it constantly. But I mean, every now and then I do want to know what's happening in the world
for sure.
and all of that. But so I mean, yeah, that's a big topic right now, but I'm trying to kind of, as much as I think it generates the views and the readership when it's talking about coronavirus, but I think it's important that we also focus on other news as well. So
Yeah.
for instance, like the data, the whole Zoom thing with data being stolen, I think that's going to be something that I'm going to focus on for this upcoming week. I have a good press release and someone I know that I want to interview about that. So
I'm excited to read that one because we're using Zoom right now.
I know we are. That's why I was like,
Yeah.
should I say that or not say that? But anyways, I mean, it's what's happening. So yeah,
Well, I mean, you're right. Like there's definitely some interesting things. And, one of the concerns is that's happening when it comes to data is our own data, our location data, and some of these privacies that we're accustomed to having that very likely have changed already or will continue to change as a result, right? You have people talking about location data with your cell phones to map if you were, you know, in an infected area or with someone that was infected. And while that might be a very interesting or beneficial tool for if it was only used for that exact thing, it's like what happens if that's mismanaged or used for other things later or used against you or whatnot. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, data privacy, and then obviously with the whole Zoom thing, there is a blockchain element. Apparently, blockchain can be used to combat this. I don't know exactly how yet because I haven't done the interview with that individual, but I'm excited to learn about
yeah.
how blockchain is being used in this case.
Yeah, totally. Especially because I'm actually really curious for that too. Probably even just from if anything, at least my assumption would be is from a, like kind of like that authenticity point or, really just making sure that holding people accountable and so forth. Because I think that's when we talk about blockchain, often people really focus on it. Blockchain might not be the right solution because they're thinking about it from a from a writing standpoint, but not necessarily from like a reading standpoint, right? Like access to that later. And that's you know it's as with all technology, it starts to improve over time. And so if something's not maybe ready now, it doesn't mean it wouldn't be ready later. I don't know. This is my thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these blockchain platforms, like it takes time to build them out. I mean, blockchain is still, and it's an emerging technology. It's very new. I mean, I've only been writing about the space since 2017, and I've already seen, the progress that's been made. But it takes time. Like this isn't going to happen overnight. I mean, like these blockchain platforms aren't going to be like the silver bullet overnight, but we're getting there. We've already come such a long way within the past 3 years, I think.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
totally, totally.
yeah.
I'd love to kind of just ask you a little bit more about your podcast, the Crypto Chick podcast. How long you been doing that? it's been over a year now, right?
It's been over a year. Yeah, I think actually almost 2 years, but I only do two shows per month. So it's not like I'm very frequent with it.
Got it.
But but yeah, I mean it's good. It's good content. It's solid content.
Yeah, no, I've
It's
listened to
not,
your interviews. I
yeah,
like them.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, cool.
So my last interview I believe was with Don Tapscott. I think that was the last one. Anyways, but it was a really, really great interview. Don had some really good insights to share about blockchain and how it's being applied in the case of coronavirus. He talked about enterprise blockchain, like the promise of blockchain and the future and the reality of blockchain. So, for anyone interested in learning about enterprise and even how blockchain can be applied to the coronavirus situation, that's a really good episode. Don is really great, and I've interviewed Alex, his son, before too. So
Very cool.
yeah.
I'd love to understand also how over the last few years, like how you've seen enterprise blockchain evolve and change, right? Like either from a level of maturity or sophistication or um, uh, how people take it or visualize it. I'm assuming you probably have a pretty interesting perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting because I started learning about, well, hearing more about enterprise blockchain after Bitcoin reached its all-time high, which I guess was what, the end of 2017. And then all of a sudden I would see more enterprises interested in blockchain as a technology. So I don't know if that had any, relation to the price of Bitcoin, but maybe it just enhanced the technology and more people were getting into blockchain.
Hmm.
But I think that use cases are really being built out versus, 2017, 2018 to now. People are really starting to understand proper use cases. So, like I said, blockchain isn't, it can't be applied to everything, but supply chain management is one of the best use cases. I think that challenges that still need to be overcome in terms of enterprise, it's getting organizations to share sensitive data on one ledger. So it's like, a lot of these enterprises, they get concerned knowing that this sensitive data is going to be on a ledger that other companies can potentially see. I mean, yes, they're private permission networks, but if you have permission, you can see that data. So I think that we need companies, these enterprises, to understand that, like, even though you can see this data, it's still private, like, zero knowledge proofs and other cryptography is ensuring the privacy of data on these networks. Another issue that we need to overcome is interoperability. So if, different blockchains can communicate with one another, that would be great. And we're just scratching the surface right now. But maybe in the next few years we'll have a solution figured out in terms of interoperability and in terms of getting organizations to better understand that, like, yes, this data is actually blockchain network.
Hmm. Totally.
So I don't know. We've seen I think better use cases now. The serious players are still here as opposed to the players that kind of disappeared. um, so I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's to come.
Yeah, definitely. And exactly, if you can have staying power through those very interesting times, and then if you can continue to have staying power through where we're at now, yeah, hopefully that means that there's some serious, interesting companies coming out.
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan, in your opinion, like what, because I know you know a lot about enterprise blockchain as well. Like, what do you think is a really interesting use case or a really interesting company that's using blockchain? Like, I'm curious to know.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of payments. Payments, and it, the argument around blockchain or even crypto around payments is the supposed latency of it, and from a writing standpoint. But where I find it really fascinating is going back to the auditability after the fact, right? Is like the read aspect later, and that's typically when where the I don't want to say issues, but that's like where people need to have that's why you would want the blockchain, is to have like that kind of provability. So I find that one really fascinating. I do think supply chain and basically anything where you have to like switch hands like that is really interesting. I'm not a fan of like when people talk about the healthcare as a use case just yet. And it could also be because I don't understand it probably as well too, in fairness. but more because of it doesn't feel like it applies to the business case. And so what I mean by that is that a lot of the health insurance providers are they benefit greatly by obfuscating the data and being like the harbor of information. So like for them to like make that information available and democratize, it doesn't make sense for their business use case. So I just don't see that's for example why I don't like it. It's altruistic almost of you. But yeah, payments and commerce and transactions, I think really is where we'll start to um I think that's what I get excited about, at least, because it's not then just like at a larger scale of what we don't see. It's like, hey, everyday use, when I make a payment transaction, um, there's some sort of level of record management there. I don't
Yeah, for
know.
sure. And I mean, and you're right. You bring up a really good point that I haven't brought up. I mean, payments is a huge use case for enterprise blockchain. Also, digital identity is really interesting.
Yeah,
And that goes hand in hand with payments and even with healthcare. I mean, if we just had these decentralized digital identity solutions that, are starting to come out now, we can potentially use that in many ways, like for
totally.
payments. We could, I mean, imagine going into any healthcare facility and just having that information, you know, from this doctor's appointment to that doctor appointment without having to dig through files. And that's what decentralized identity can bring. So that's another interesting use case as well. That
Yeah.
banks also are looking into. I covered a story recently about a bank using a decentralized identity solution from a company called Everest. So
Oh, very cool. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I think decentralized identity is super interesting. Um, just because like I remember I needed to get or sign up for oil from an oil and gas company because I live in an old house. And the person was like, oh, well, what's your social security number? And I'm like, well, why do you need my social security number? And I was like, oh, well, just in case there's an issue or this that. I was like, well, you need my social security number in case I don't pay, so then that way you can potentially send me to collections or something. And I totally get that. I totally understand that. But you have my credit card on file, so you can charge that. And by the way, you can still send me to collections even if you don't have my social security number if you wanted to. It's like, well, don't worry. It's only on one computer and only one person sees this. and I'm like, if I'm worried about Experian getting their sensitive data hacked, I'm definitely nervous about my social security number living on side of someone's computer with like Windows
yeah,
2007 or something. Yeah.
yeah. It's crazy. It's like we need a better system, and digital identity can bring that, like decentralized digital identity. So
Well, and totally. And what's interesting is that so many is people's information is already compromised. So it's like, what do you do? Do you
right.
just give everybody a reset? Because all our social security numbers are just everywhere already. And
Yeah,
even if you're the most careful person, which is just it sucks. It's not nice.
yeah. It's a scary world we're living in.
Yeah. Yeah, it is weird. I mean, like
Everything is frightening.
where I think have you seen the show Black Mirror?
Yeah, of course.
I
It's
yeah,
great.
so I like it, and I think one of the reasons why that show's so good is because it's a few layers away from where we're at. You know what I mean? It's not like the stuff that they talk about is crazy, but then you're like, oh shit, like that's not that far removed from what we're talking about. So like that,
Especially now with, yeah,
yeah,
with how we're all quarantined and we, if we were to leave our house, now they're recommending to wear masks. And yeah, it's like an episode of the Black Mirror. And it's like it never ends. It's like I wake up and I'm like, is this over yet? Is this over
it's
yet?
crazy.
When am I going to be able to do something other than like go jogging outside? That's all
Yeah.
I've been doing. Jogging outside and writing. I mean, yeah, it's
Well, and it's crazy, and you might have I bet you have an interesting outlook on this. It's crazy how information is used um, as tools from and not to get heavily political here, but the mask issue, right? We were told not to use masks, and any rational person was like, that doesn't seem right, but okay. um, and at the end of the day, it's like, hey, we were told not to use masks because there was a supply chain issue, right? Because there was basically the quantity on hand was not there, and let's not worry people when um, you know just telling people to wear a handkerchief though obviously not as good as an N95 mask, would be better than, no mask at all.
Hmm.
It's weird how information is used to fit the narrative of what someone wants, regardless of who it is, right? I don't know.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing, like going back to the me pasta, it's like that's what I'm saying. There's so much data out there around coronavirus. Even the mask, it's like that's misinformation. Like we're being told to wear masks, we're being told not to wear masks. Like, can someone just aggregate some data, put that on a blockchain platform, and just make sense of everything that's happening with this? So I'm really hopeful for me pasta. And I told Jonathan Levy of Hasera to keep in touch with me. Like I want to know updates.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I'm definitely gonna check that out because that sounds super interesting. It's right up my
yeah,
alley. Like I said, every
yeah.
morning I'm just like looking up what happened, with that, and my heart goes out to anybody that's suffering and, from that right now. And it's just so crazy hearing the stories from the medical professionals and people impacted by that. It's awful. It's awful.
It's really sad. And even, and now I know people that, as I'm sure you do as well, that have it or had it or in the hospital on a ventilator. And it's like, it's so scary. It's so sad. Like I have nightmares about it. I have nightmares about coronavirus. I wake up in the middle of the night. I can't sleep anymore. Like a relative of mine is in the hospital in San Antonio on a ventilator
Uh,
right now, and he's hanging in there. But it's like, it's sad. It's just so sad just to think that like these people have families and they were just, traveling one day and then come back with this. It's just
yeah.
awful.
Right. And they have to be alone too. Like that's the worst part is like you have to be alone. Oh, it breaks
Yeah.
my heart. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It's awful.
Well, I hope your family member gets better soon. Yeah, it's crazy. Well,
Yeah.
and what's weird is or not weird, but what will be interesting to see is like what's the world that we come out of, through all this, right? Like a lot of people say is like, hey, like this is everything's different, everything's changed, like we're not going back to like the old way. I don't even know what that means yet, though, right? Like, so I don't know that too many people do. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens there.
Right.
Well, let's end on a happy note. So you like to run a
Yeah.
lot.
Yes, I do.
And
Endorphins.
yeah, nice, nice.
Yeah.
Do you just do it like for exercise and for fun, or like do you do it competitively also? Do you do marathons or do anything like that as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is this, because you were talking about like there's so much negativity in the world right now, but there's also some positive things that are coming out of this quarantine and shelter in place thing. So for me, that positiveness is coming from the fact that right now I'm in Dallas. I'm not in San Francisco. I'm with my parents at their house. So I get to take like 4 mile walks almost every day with my dad. So,
That's
I'm
awesome.
spending a lot of time with him. I'm becoming a better outdoor runner. I have a treadmill at my house in Tiburon. So now that I'm in Dallas, I'm forced to run outside, but actually I'm getting really, really, really good at it. And it feels really good to just like breathe fresh air and know that you like have this great lung capacity to run. And it makes me just so thankful for my health. And I'm happy to be spending time with my parents. And it's like on the weekends I get to write rather than like go out and go shopping or get my nails done or, waste time, whatever. It's like I get to do something useful, and I'm not sitting around, I'm not watching TV and eating snacks and all this. Like I'm really trying to find the positive in everything. I'm really trying to
Yeah.
make the most of this time.
I think that's great. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
I think there will be a great reflection or a great awakening that comes out for certain people like yourself, like what you're talking about, right? It's like how do you take this moment and make the best of it? And yeah, same here. What's funny is so last night I have family in different parts of the world, family in Venezuela, Mexico, Spain, and we have like a family chat and we just like joke or like send each other messages all the time. And earlier in the week I was like, hey, why don't we all have dinner together on Zoom? And so anyways, we did that last night, and it was
That's so
so
nice.
it was so much fun. We were all just dying laughing, like trying to talk over each other. It was great. And what was funny is that like there's no reason why we couldn't have done that before COVID, because we all live in different places. But we made it a thing because of COVID. So it's like, hey, like let's just like try to be closer. And if anybody has family out there in different parts, I highly recommend doing it because it was a lot of fun. We're gonna do it again next week, so we'll see how many weeks in a row we keep it going. But that was good.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like things like that. It's so great to hear. And I mean, even for me, it's like if I'm sitting around, I'm not really sure what to do. It's like, you know what? I'm just gonna get on FaceTime and call a friend. Like I used to live
Hmm.
in Tel Aviv. Like I'm gonna just go catch up with my friends in Israel, which it's like, before this, it's like I never really did that. So
Yeah,
there are some
yeah,
benefits, like some
totally.
positivity coming out of all of this.
I agree. I agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Just making sure people are okay and checking in on them and catching up
exactly.
on fun
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
Well, hey, this has been great. I want to give you the floor if there's something you want to like share with people or a question that you want people to think about as they go about their day or something want them to think about.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you. So, first of all, I'm happy to talk to people or to answer any questions. If they can reach out to me on Twitter at Rachel Wolf00. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive on social media, Instagram, blockchain, and bikinis. Um, and I don't know. I mean, I guess to end everything on a positive note, just kind of like what we were talking about, Jonathan. It's like right now the world is in a different, scary, bad place, I guess. But we've just got to make the most of it. And I think that we can do that by enjoying, nature, enjoying family time, catching up with friends, reading books, like doing something really good for ourselves. And now's the
Yeah.
time. So we need to look past all the negativity and see the positive in all of this. That's how I want to end this
I,
conversation.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I totally agree. It's definitely a time of, empathy and compassion for folks. And, one thing I like to tell people too is, we all have to remember that people process things differently, and so like maybe someone is affected stronger than this and like we might think that they shouldn't be or whatever. It's like, hey, like we all process stuff different. I was joking with a friend who was like, man, I'm just so stressed out lately and I don't know why. I was like, it's because it's a heavy time and it's not a snow day. It's not like you get to go stay at home and play in the
right.
snow. Like you're staying at home working, but you have this other stuff. So I think it's totally okay. That was
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Well, hey, Rachel, thank you so much. So best ways to get a hold of you is on Twitter. You said Rachel Wolf 00.
Yep, that's it.
Okay,
Yep.
awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. For those listening, I appreciate you listening and watching. Please make sure that you're following us at TF Blockchain or follow me at JG Product. And make sure you're on the YouTube and our podcast so you can get awesome, awesome interviews like this with Rachel. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.